All right, let's talk a bit about jQuery. So what's wrong with what we've been doing so far? I mean, nothing particularly wrong. We could create various libraries of our own and create all sorts of tooling that would make it just easier. And eventually, as you mature as a developer, as the industry matures, as more developers use JavaScript, they create tools that just make it easier to build things. Or in particular, one of the more challenging things across using JavaScript across several throughout the history of JavaScript has been the fragmentation of the various versions of browsers, right? Especially as new companies and players have become a part of the industry and trying to compete with new features and speed and whatnot, and as new vendors came in and as vendors themselves had different iterations of the same of various browsers, the language, the JavaScript language, was severely fragmented, right? Folks were using still browsers that were very old, from old operating systems, so features that were new in the JavaScript standard were not available to everybody from all browsers, because you on this side as a developer, you cannot impose what browser is going to be used to consume your HTML, to consume your JavaScript. You don't know who's going to be downloading your page. Yes, so it might be that somebody is using the very latest Chrome or using a very old IE version, God forbid. And so a lot of the features that you might assume are there, they're not actually there. So this complicates the development when it's so fragmented, when you can't guarantee the infrastructure on which your application is going to be executed. Yes. So to deal with this, what developers had to do is use various ways to identify what particular vendor of browser was being used, and not only that, but find out what version of that particular browser was being used for that particular vendor, and then write all sorts of mechanisms that it would behave one way if it was this vendor with that version, or some other way if that vendor with that version. Okay, so you ended up with lots of switch case statements, and if this, then that. If it's this version, do this. If it's that other version, do that. All spread out your source code, right? As this evolved, folks would create, would centralize this detection, and over time became fairly sophisticated. And after several evolutions and iterations, you end up with something like jQuery, right? jQuery is a very thin layer above JavaScript that it abstracts the actual browser, so that you don't have to code directly to the JavaScript of the browser that it understands. Instead, you code at a slightly higher level of abstraction, right? That clearly gives you functions that are very clear of what the behavior you want, and then jQuery will translate that into whatever 2 or 3 or 4 function calls of lower level JavaScript. Yes? And it will figure out the correct vendor, the correct version, right? And it'll do the right thing for the correct vendor for the correct version, right? So that you won't have to deal with all these versions and whatnot. Make sense? Right? It also adds, again, a little higher level of abstraction, so you can think about the DOM as an actual object, right? And currently the API for JavaScript to add a new node, right? It's fairly complex, right? You have to create a new instance of a node, then add another text node, and then add it to the original. It's almost like manipulating XML, which it is. Right? HTML is XML, right? And if you've had the misfortune of using the low-level XML API, it's very verbose, right? It's you have to write 3, 4, 5 lines of code to do something really, really simple. Okay, so what jQuery did is says, okay, well, let's find what the common use cases are, right, of what you want to do to the DOM, and let's, here's a nice little function that does what 3 or 4 lines of XML manipulation would do, right? And let's give you a very clean API to do that. And so jQuery it's by far the most popular library. Very rare that you'll find a project that will just write straight to JavaScript. Usually there's some kind of level of abstraction of which jQuery is certainly will certainly be part of that layer of abstraction. Make sense? Right? It's open source. It's freely available. It's very, very popular, and I certainly encourage you to become very familiar with it. Okay, it's a very, very good skill to have. Obviously, jQuery has evolved to more than the little layer of abstraction. Today, there's quite a lot of frameworks on top of it. One of the fairly popular ones are jQuery user interface, which builds on top of jQuery, right, to provide a nice set of high-level abstractions of behaviors that are very commonly found. We'll look at that in a minute. Let's first look at jQuery itself. Okay. All right. So let's see. So it's at jQuery.com, and the way you bring it on board is by either downloading it and copying into your JavaScript file folder and whatnot, and then loading it as a file. It's written in plain JavaScript, right? It's just pure JavaScript, but it abstracts it, giving you an API that allows you to think about the DOM as an object, right? All right. So, or better yet, instead of loading it and hosting it yourself on your server, you can instead point to a CDN, right? Of which this is one of them, Google APIs. That's one of the more common CDNs to use. But locally, when you're developing, it's a good idea to have a local copy, right? And once you're going to deploy it in production, then replace it with a CDN version of it. Okay. All right. So let's go into jQuery here, and let's create a hello jQuery under there. So this will be HTML. This is hello.html, and let's make here h1 hello from jQuery. Okay. Let's make sure that we can navigate there. Let's see. This should be O2 jQuery. There it is. Hello from jQuery. Yes? We're in that directory. Awesome. All right. So how do you bring jQuery? You load it, right? I have it already here. Let's see. I believe I have it under vendors, jQuery. There it is. So I'm going to load that one file, right? So we'll do that. We'll say script. I'll do source, and I'll go up a couple folders, vendors, and I'm going to go down to jQuery and then bring jQuery min. There it is. Okay, so it's loaded. All right. So what does jQuery do? So jQuery, what they do is something I'm going to tell you that not to do, unless you become as popular as jQuery, then you can do whatever you want. But as of now, don't do the following. jQuery declares a global object. Okay, declares a global variable that is available globally, right? From anywhere, you can call the variable jQuery. Okay, same thing with Angular. Angular does the same thing, right? So if you become as popular as Lodash and jQuery and Angular, by all means. Okay, Until then, do not use globals. So here it is. So it declares this global variable jQuery it's a function, and you can pass in an argument, and that argument is interpreted normally. It's interpreted as a selector, right? Meaning this is going to refer to a piece of elements in the DOM, right? So this is going to allow me to select, right, a piece of the DOM, and once I have it, once I have a reference to it, I can then do all sorts of manipulations on it. I can do all sorts of actions. I can hide it. I can show it. I can change its style. I can do all sorts of manipulations. Yes, and this right here, the fact that I can retrieve an element from the DOM, and that I can treat the DOM as if it were some data set, right, of which I want a subset, right, of that data set, right, is what gives jQuery its name. I want to be able to query the DOM, right, as if it were some data set, like a table, right, and if you have a SQL table, you want to be able to query that table. Yes, you can select all elements, all rows whose select all employees whose salaries are between 100,000 and 120,000, or select employees that were employed between January and December, right? And that returns a subset of all employees, correct? So jQuery, this selector, allows you to do that, right? In plain JavaScript, you use something like retrieve an element by ID, by class, by attribute. Well, these selectors are much more powerful than those. Okay, they use a very common mechanism that you should be already familiar with, right? If you've been using styling elements using CSS, you have figured out that the left-hand side of a CSS rule, right, is a string, right, that refers to elements in the DOM, right? Right, that you say that, hey, I want all paragraphs who have this class that are under a div that has this ID. I want to make those all red. Yes, right. So that selector of the DOM, that's exactly what you can pass here. You can pass here CSS rules, right? And all the elements that match that rule are now available here, right? And then you can apply the same action to all those elements. I want to make them all red. I want to make them all different. Change the font to all of them. I want to make them all draggable. I want to hide them all. I want whatever transformation. You can then compute that transformation here by applying the action. Make sense? All right. Okay, so this can select a subset of the entire DOM, right, giving you specific elements that you want to operate on. And then you apply the actions. Make sense? All right, awesome. Now, since developers are lazy and they don't want to type 6 letters, of which one of them is a capital letter, we have an alias for that. Right, the $sign is an alias of the jQuery function. All right, so that we don't have to labor through jQuery. All right, so here's a couple examples. Let's see if we can build a paragraph here. So let's go here and let's add some code here. Right, I'm going to also have here a script that loads src hello.js, of which I'm going to do all my coding in there, which doesn't exist yet. So let me add it. Let's see, modules, jQuery, hello. Let me add this JS here, new JavaScript. So this is hello.js. Oops. Refactor, rename, JS. There we go. All right, so what do we do here? Let's see. We can in this hello HTML, let's add here a paragraph. Lorem ipsum. I'll paste it so it's long. And there's my paragraph. So from the example here, we can refer to that paragraph like this. Let's grab that. So from my JavaScript, I can just say, grab me all the P's, right? All the paragraphs, all the elements whose name is P, and then here are the operation that I want to do, right? And what does this do? Like the name suggests, I am modifying its CSS, its style. I want to change the attribute, the CSS attribute color to red, right? And lo and behold, it changes it to red. Good. Or here's another example. I can refer to the hello, and if I have a class of details, I can refer to that. You know, again, I don't want to type jQuery, so I'm going to say $. I can grab the details, and I can just hide it. Right? What does this do? It does a display none. Yes? But it abstracts it into a nice, convenient little function. Right? And internally, it grabs the style dot display equal none, basically. Yes? Well, that's a little bit too cryptic, having to remember the style, the display, the none. So instead, it just, it gives you a nice little function that abstracts that away. Okay? So if I go and display it, it's gone. It's hidden. It's still in the DOM. I can look at the elements. It's still there, but notice that the details, the style, it added this. See, style display none. Right. So that's what that's the modification that it did on the DOM to hide it. Make sense? All right. Let's keep going. Let's not bring it back just yet. If I have an input field, I can grab its value. Right. So if I have in the HTML, I have an input field down here, input whose ID is name, right? Where I want to maybe a placeholder says enter your name. So if I have that and I refresh, notice it says enter your name. From the hello.js, I can refer to that. I can grab it. Here's where I grab that input field, and I am retrieving its value, and then I can do a console log name, right? So if we refresh, the console doesn't display anything. Wait, what? Oh, because it doesn't have a value, obviously. So let's actually give it a value here. I'll say value is Alice. So if I refresh, there it is. It grabbed it, and then it just displayed it on the console. Make sense? And then we'll add buttons and whatnot in a minute. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so one of the things that jQuery also can do is that notice where we have put our hello.js. See that, right? If I move it up here, right, we'll have the same problem we had earlier, right? In the previous example, if I load this, if I reload this, notice that nothing is working, right? I'm not getting any of my transformations. Why? Well, because when hello here ran and started doing all these transformations, there were no P's, there were no details, there were no names. Yes, all right. So none of this worked. So what jQuery allows you to do is to encapsulate everything inside the following. Right? Let's copy this. This says that I'm going to grab the document object. I'm going to grab the document. We know what that is, right? That's represents the DOM, and I am going to apply the ready function on it. What this says is that I'm going to add an unload event handler, right, for the DOM to notify me, for the browser to notify me when the document has been parsed, when it has been interpreted, right, and it's already rendered, okay, so that I can go later on and start doing all my transformations. Make sense? Right, so now I can embed all my code. I can embed all my code inside here, the original code. Make sense? So now when I refresh, now I have my transformations back in there. Make sense? Everybody okay? But notice how cryptic this syntax is. All right? Notice how cryptic. Here we have document.ready. Okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Right? But then you have this embedded function in there. Right? If you don't come from JavaScript, that should cringe you. If you're coming from Java or from some other languages, perhaps this syntax is not as pretty as you might like. JavaScript gives a different version of this, which is a little bit easier to swallow. Right? Gives this other syntax. You can do away with all this and go all the way up to here. Okay? Meaning the $, the jQuery function, can take as argument, not a selector, right? An actual function. And the default understanding is that that's the function you want me to call when the browser loads everything. Yes? So again, this is a little bit easier to read. It works exactly the same. Right? It works exactly the same way. But still, I think it's still too cryptic. Right? I think it would be easier to read if you do the following. If you take away the function out of here, make it a real function, right? Give it a name, whatever name you want it, right? And then you can refer to that name in here. I think this is a little bit easier to read, okay? And this behaves the same way. All right, this says, when you're done loading, hey browser, when you're done loading, call this function init. Right? Init is a very common name for a function that runs the very first time. Okay? But you can call it other things. It doesn't have to be called init. Right? But you will very, very often see this syntax. Okay? And you have to get used to it. Functions can be treated as just as any other object in JavaScript. They can be passed as an argument, right? And can be received as a variable on the other end, right? And then you can programmatically call it anytime you want. You can call invoke on it, and then it executes, right? So yeah, start becoming familiar with this syntax of nested functions. When a function, notice this function has no name, it is referred to as an anonymous function. All right, a function, yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? And in JavaScript especially, they go out of their way. JavaScript on the browser goes out of its way not to declare things. All right, and the reason is that this jQuery library is just one of many libraries, right? That you're going to be loading. Okay, and here's we have two JavaScript files that we're loading here. Yes, both of them are declaring things on the global space. We already saw that jQuery is declaring at least the jQuery and the $, right? If you have another library later on that also declares the $, because they're lazy and they want to use the $, it will override, right, the jQuery's $, right? So if you have a lot of libraries, you run into the danger of libraries overriding their namespaces. Yes? Right? So JavaScript libraries in general go out of their way not to declare things, right? Not to name things as much as possible. They use anonymous things. All right? Make sense? Right? So that's one of the reasons this is very popular. I don't want to give this function a name because I don't want to litter the namespace with another init function. There might be another function called init that I'm overriding, or somebody's going to override me later on. Like this, nobody's overriding me. Right? I have my little function, and it nobody. Everybody okay? All right. All right, but I'm going to put it like this. I think this is easier to read. There we go, init. All right, let's keep going. Selectors, yeah, selectors use the CSS rules. So here's the click event. And now all these actions here, you will be finding that JavaScript uses functions as both setters and getters, right? Whereas in other languages, you typically have two functions named differently for the two purposes, right? You have, set first name, right, or get first name, right? In JavaScript, it's common to use the same function name. So the function might be called just name, right, or first name. Okay. If you don't provide any arguments, it is interpreted as a read. If you pass arguments, it is interpreted as a write. Make sense? It's very common. So here is our first example of that strategy. We have the click function. Right? The click function, if you don't pass it any arguments, it will generate a click event. Right? So meaning this is the equivalent of somebody with a mouse clicking on the paragraph. Right? If somebody's listening for a click event, they're going to be invoked. They're going to be notified. Hey, somebody clicked on the paragraph. Right? And there's several frameworks, there's several testing frameworks that use this, right, to automate, user interaction, right, to simulate folks clicking here and dragging and doing things, and then, to test the behavior of a user interface, right? So the click function has another version. Okay, has another version. If instead of using the no argument version, this one generates the event. This one instead says, I'm not going to generate an event. I'm going to listen for an event. If somebody clicks that paragraph, I'm going to execute that function. Yes? All right, so let's do that. So we already have a paragraph, right? And let's apply here a jQuery paragraph here. The same paragraph. I'm going to, if it's clicked, I want to call the function pClicked. Okay, and I can declare my function down here. Function pClicked, and I'm going to alert p was clicked. Everybody okay? Right. So if I refresh this and I click on this, it shows the alert, right? Or I can bring back the details. It was hidden earlier, yes? I'm going to bring it back, right? And again, I don't have to remember that it's a display block, styles display equal block. I can just say show, right? So there's hide and show, right? So that if I run this and I click on this, it does the alert and it brings back the header. Everybody okay? All right, awesome. And let's remove the alert. All right, let's keep going. All right, so here's a little example with a header, and we can toggle it on and off. Right, we have hide me with two buttons, right? And there's actually two. There's two IDs, hide me and hide me timed, and we have two buttons. Okay, we have two buttons that we're going to click. So let's see what they look like now. There we go. We have hide me and hide me too, and two buttons. Click to hide to time. We're going to create two event handlers that if I click on one, it's going to hide it. Right, so let's do that. Let's add over here. There it is. So this says grab the click to hide, and when it's clicked, grab hide me and hide it. So here's click to hide is this one. Click to hide is ID. So this should be ampersand. I mean hash. And this is click to hide, and hide me is also an ID. I forgot to put the hashes there. Let me fix that. This is hash, 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 and hash. Oops. Okay, let's refresh. So if I click on click to hide, it hides the first one. How about the second one? The second one, it's not. If you grab the same one, and this is click to hide, the second one is called click to hide timed, right? And if I click it, I'm going to hide the second one. Okay, but if you put an argument here, it tells you use an animation. Use the default animation, right? And the default animation is to just linearly hide it until it doesn't show anymore. So if I refresh, this one just hides it immediately, whereas this one takes its time, and the default is to make its height go to 0. Everybody okay? All right. Now over here you can provide other ways to hide it, right? Maybe you want it horizontally instead of vertically. You can make it fade out. There's a whole bunch of effects that you can choose to hide it. I'm not going to go through them. Look at some of the documentation. You can handle all sorts of mouse events. So here you have enter here, so that if I can detect when the mouse enters and when the mouse leaves. So let's bring that over here. Let's handle that. Right. So if we refresh and we enter, we get an alert. Right. And then when we leave, we get another alert. Okay. Again, just tiny little things like that just make it so much easier to build more interactive user interfaces. You can toggle. Right. So toggle. And they provide a toggle function, right? So that it already keeps track of the state, right, of whatever it is you're hiding or showing. Right? So that, again, convenience. Toggle, this probably needs to be an ID, no? Toggle, yes, so this is a hash. Somebody didn't QA this. Okay, so let's refresh so that when you... Oh, I entered. Okay. So click on it and toggled. And then I toggle again and it shows it again, right? I think I'm going to comment this out. These enter. They're kind of annoying. Let's see, mouse enter, mouse leave. We did that already. Mouse up or down. You can detect when the mouse gets clicked or down. I'm going to skip over that. Animate. You can make things shift right, shift left. This one's a cute one. So for instance, if you let's add that, and as you click these, and if you click one of these. Button left. Well, I didn't do the right. I guess I didn't do that. Okay, let's do it here. So we have this toggle button left, and we want another one, but the right. So the right is going to animate to the right, and the other one is animate to the left. There we go. Okay, so two buttons. We have two buttons, one with the ID left and one with the ID right, and go ahead and animate this, animate me here. Yes? So this is going to, and so this is a hash, and this is a hash. All right, let's try that. Let's see if it breaks. So right doesn't do anything. Wait, what? Am I coming here? Animate, button left, button right. Am I even coming here? Alert, left. Just want to make sure I am even here. So this is right. Okay, I am hitting that. I am getting in there. Why are you not animating? Let me inspect. Okay, it did change left and right, but why didn't you change? Maybe because the position is not absolute? Is that it? Why are you not animating? All right, I'll need to see what is going on. But it should have moved it slowly. You can give it any set of attributes, like left, right, top, bottom, the color. It'll interpolate between different colors, the beginning of the color and the ending of a color. And you can tell the speed that you want it to be, how many seconds does it has to go from one to another. And you can also chain them, right? So that first it'll do one, then it'll do another one. So it's pretty cool if it would have worked. Did I spell animate? Animate. Did I spell it? No, it looks like it's right. All right. All right, let's keep going. Animate. Callbacks. All right, so JavaScript is big on callbacks, right? And next week, or the following, when we start talking to the server, callbacks are going to be huge importance, right? Basically, it allows you to register a function that at some point will be called in the future, right? That some action will happen, and once it's done, you're going to be notified that it's done, right? And the way you'll be notified is that it'll call the function that you give it, right? And we already did that a little bit. This init function is kind of a callback, right? We're telling the browser, hey browser, do your thing, parse your XML, create the DOM. Once you're done, call me. Let me know. And the way it's notifying me is by calling the init function. And then I come in and I make all these changes in the DOM. Make sense? Right? So here's an example of where we have a button that we're using to hide this. Right? We've already shown you how to do this. Here we're saying in the JavaScript we're going to grab the h1 here, the h1, right? And we're going to hide it in 3 seconds. And once it's done, right, it's going to notify us by calling this function, this anonymous function that we're giving it, right? So here we're saying if we click it, right, call this function. There it is. So it's going to call that function. What's that going to do, the function? Well, the body says to hide it, and then as it's hiding it, at the end, we're giving it another function as an argument, which is going to be invoked at the end of 3 seconds. You see that? Right, so 3 callbacks. Right, the init is a callback, then inside there's another function here, which is a callback to the click event once you generate the click event. And then once it's done animating, it's going to call yet another function. See that? JavaScript is very big about nesting functions inside of functions, right? So you need to start getting used to that syntax. Yes?
Shouldn't we be using promises instead of callbacks?
We will be using promises a little later. Yeah. All right. So let's show this. So if we click here, right, it hides it, and at the end of 3 seconds, then it notifies us that it's done. Okay. Yes.
What was the thing in the very beginning that you said don't do?
I'm sorry?
What was the thing in the very beginning that you said don't do this?
Oh, declaring global variables. Yep. So Angular, jQuery, Lodash, all these very popular libraries, they get away with it because it actually is very convenient for us, right? That we are able to access them from the global space, right? There's not, without any fanfare. All right, let's keep going. Chaining. Oftentimes you'll find yourself doing a lot of transformations. We already did something like that. Notice here, when we were applying these transformations both to the same paragraph, right? One was a .css, the other one was a .click, right? jQuery declares all these functions in such a way that this here, at the end of this function, the return value of that function is this, is the actual object that was initially referring to, right? By doing that, it makes this redundant. See that? I don't really need this. I can just do that. See that? Because this function returns this. So I can just keep reapplying it. See that? So that feature is called chaining, right? And that's not free, right? jQuery writes these functions in such a way that this is possible. Okay, the function has to be written to support this feature, right? And that's a very common suggestion when you're writing JavaScript in general. When you write your own functions, that you write them in such a way that they can be chained, right? So this would do exactly the same thing. Oops. Right? It generates this paragraph down here. Oops. What happened here? Did I type something wrong here? I probably did, didn't I? Oh yeah, this is not supposed to be there. Okay, so if I click on this, something happens, right? Since you can chain several of these functions together, this could get fairly long, right? So to improve readability, typically what we do is that we put all these chained functions in their separate lines, right? So it makes it easier to read. Yes.
This chaining, does it read and process?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So any transformations for the next one is it's von Neumann. Yeah, from left to right, from top to bottom. Yep. It's synchronous. Yep. So don't write things all in one line. Obviously, put them all in separate lines. So this is a very common syntax you'll find out there. What else? Reading and writing text. You can read and write HTML elements. So here's a to-do list using jQuery. This is a simple example on how to create a tiny little program using both raw JavaScript and then doing the same exact thing using HTML. I don't think I have time to go over it. jQuery UI. jQuery UI is a library built on top of jQuery, right? Let me stop here and we'll start a new video.